Hi, I'm Dr. Sammy, your friendly neighborhood entomologist. But I wasn't always. See, I used to be terrified of insects as a kid. I couldn't think of anything more disturbing. It actually got to a point where my mom got a call from my second grade teacher. Hi, Mrs. Ramsey. I just wanted to give you a call. Sammy hasn't been out to recess all week. He said he doesn't want to meet any insects, quote, on their own turf. So, so my mom took me to our local library and parked me in the entomology section all summer long. I can still remember her saying, Sammy, you know, people are afraid of things that they don't understand. Well, that very summer, I told my parents, I'm going to be an entomologist when I grow up. And that year, my dad and I spent a lot of time catching bugs in my backyard and putting them in these Mott's applesauce jars, bringing them into my room, only to watch them inevitably die. I was missing something. And I didn't make a lot of progress in figuring out what until one day in my backyard, I imagined myself as a millipede. I don't like that everything can see me really well, but I can't see them because I don't have any eyes. But maybe my millipedes don't like it when I put them in jars with no rocks or bark for them to hide under. Well, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was solving scientific problems via empathy, something that I had no idea was a skill. And empathy allows us to feel what others feel, to understand life from another's vantage point, creating interruptions in our mental autopilot and our tendency towards assumption. But I didn't realize just how difficult it would be to be empathic in the scientific community at times. See, it's kind of an open secret that within science, and especially within graduate school, this is the space where scientists are training new scientists. It's also a space that's pretty lacking in empathy. This periodically makes headlines, like in 2016, when a professor's bullying, abuse, and threats to summarily dismiss students from everything that they had worked for years culminated in the suicide of a student. Well, despite those headlines, when I became a graduate student, I was so excited to be pursuing my lifelong dream of being an entomologist. I can still remember my first committee meeting. My advisor looked at me and said, Sammy, you've been doing great in your coursework, and your project idea is a great one, but something about you just doesn't seem like doctoral material. So I've decided to dismiss you from the program. Now, Sammy, you just don't have the right skill set for science. You have to trust me on this one. And this isn't something that you can learn. Now look, some folks just want to play in your face. A lack of empathy is a failure of imagination. She couldn't imagine that someone like me could be a scientist, but I could. After 9 months of fighting through an appeals process, I returned to the program, but with my confidence on shaky footing. So, of course, I chose the simplest, easiest project that I could think of, global honeybee health decline. Simple. But as it turns out, the right skill set for understanding that complicated subject was curiosity commingled with empathy. See, our bees are dying rapidly, and at the center of the problem is varroa, this tiny tick-like mite that's apparently eating their blood. But if it's feeding on their blood, how does it cause so much damage so quickly when just removing such a small amount of their blood? And something that constantly stood out to me that I couldn't stop thinking about, how are they producing these ginormous eggs every single day if they're feeding on a diet of mostly water and bee blood? If I was pregnant with a baby every single day that was 24% of my body weight, I would need more than just chicken broth for nourishment. So I looked into the literature on the subject and found that the idea that they are feeding on the bee's blood has pretty shaky foundation. And if they're not feeding on the bee's blood, then in more than 70 years of us trying to help the bees, our research has been skewed in the wrong direction. My hypothesis? Maybe they're feeding on the bee's liver. Because as I looked at the different pathologies that are associated with this parasite, I noticed that they all resembled liver disease. And so I looked at the parasites feeding on the bees and found that they only fed near the liver. I fluorescently stained the liver and found it inside of the mite's gut. But if I really wanted to prove that these mites were feeding on the bee's liver and that it was essential to their diet, I would have to find a way to feed them blood and liver and track which ones were surviving and reproducing. And that is not easy when you're working with parasites. You have to figure out every little detail of how the host interacts with the parasite that triggers the parasite to feed, and if you don't, they just die. And look, for several months, these parasites dying was my entire life, just watching them die. I even made their food look like a little baby bee in hopes that they would feed on that, and they still did not feed. Oh, my gosh, I was missing something. And if I was going to figure it out, I would have to from the parasite's vantage point. So I did what I did as a kid. I went through my empathy exercise, and y'all, I facepalmed almost immediately. Why did I spend all that time trying to make this decoy bee look like a bee when these little doofuses can't even see? No eyes. Look at that, not a single eye on that face. When I imagined myself as one of these mites, I realized that my world was only smell, taste, and touch. And so I took this really thin membrane that felt like bee skin and rubbed it up against a bee so that it got the bee's smell and taste, and then wrapped that around my decoy bee, and voila, the parasites ate. And they lived long, fruitful lives, and they had babies. But only if fed the bee's liver. So I had cracked the case. All these years, these parasites were killing our bees with liver disease. And now that we know that, we can give our bees a fighting chance. Thank you. And can I just say, y'all, I was so excited when I saw that first mite egg. I mean, I even named her. I named her PhD. Because at this point, they're going to have to run me my degree, right? Right? So, but consider this. That study, critical for saving the bees, almost didn't happen because of how we have intentionally structured science. All of the policies that allowed me to be booted from my program on a mentor's whim are still in place at my former institution and at many others around the country. It seems like we don't consider a lack of empathy to be an impediment to researchers doing their jobs. And somehow we have decided that we're going to select for that quality. We really shouldn't, considering how poorly that's worked out in the past. The non-consensual harvesting of Henrietta Lax's cells. The intentional transplanting of tumors into Puerto Ricans by Dr. Rhodes, or Dr. Sims, who conducted surgery on enslaved women without anesthesia. When conducting studies without empathy, atrocity is right around the corner. The slide into apathy and callous disposition is now again the path of least resistance in science, modeled for us by a world that is tired of empathy. So let's embed in the pursuit of knowledge ethical intelligence as we train the next generation of researchers. Because curiosity without empathy is observation without understanding. And as Mama Ramsey will tell you, people fear what they don't understand. And as I can tell you, fear and lack of imagination are lousy guiding principles in science. Thank you. Thank you.